Okay, it's 7 o'clock.
Yes, Alex, what's going on?
All right, good evening, everybody. I'm going to call to order the Committee of Infrastructure. This is Wednesday, January 26, 2022 at 7 p.m. in the automatic chamber and via Zoom teleconference. To access Zoom, please refer to the agenda on the city's website for the meeting link. At this time, I'm going to ask the clerk to please call the roll.
You want to nominate the clerk first?
Oh, yes, but I'll have the temporary acting clerk will please call the roll.
Okay.
Alderman at Large Michael O'Brien.
Present.
Alderman Dowd.
Present?
Alderman Camo is present. Alderman Gouveia.
Here.
Alderman Jettie.
Here.
We have 5 present.
Okay, very good. Also in attendance is Alderman Derek Tebow and Mr. Tim Cummings, Economic Development Director. Now we're going to go to a matter of housekeeping. Every good board needs a clerk, and we have somebody that has offered to step up to the plate, so I will look to my vice chair for a nomination.
I'd like to nominate Alderman Alex Como to be clerk of the Infrastructure Committee.
Okay, nominate Alderman Como to serve as committee clerk for the 2022 to 2023 term. Are there any other nominations? Seeing none.
Motion to close nominations?
Alderman Dowd makes a motion to close nominations. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Close nominations is the rule. I will now present the vote to elect Alderman Como as committee clerk for the 2022 to 2023 term. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, congratulations, Mr. Alderman Como.
There you go.
Okay. At this particular time, we'll open it up to public comment. Anybody in the chamber wishes to comment, please step forward. There'll be a 3-minute time limit. We'll warn you towards the close of a 30-second warning. And please state your name and your address.
Okay, Mary Lou Blaisdell. I live at 32 Webster Street in Nashua. And I'm here tonight to talk in support of the presentation that you're going to hear from Director Cummings in a few minutes. I chair the Downtown Improvement Committee, and we have looked at this presentation. Our committee also put money forward to study West Pearl Street. We believe in the project. We believe that the project does need to go forward. West Pearl Street, whether there was a performing arts center being built here or not, was definitely a need. And I think you would all agree of some updating from the sidewalks being too small to be even wheelchair accessible or ADA compliant, to the street just hasn't had attention in years. So now with the art center coming in and the increased traffic that there will be on that street, it's a prime time for us to look at West Pearl Street and to get it where it needs to be. We did the sidewalks on Main Street several years ago. We've dedicated a lot of time to Main Street, and we need to dedicate the same amount of time and energy to make West Pearl Street up to what it needs to be also. So on behalf of our committee, I just wanted to let you know that our committee is in full support of this program, and we have put dollars behind it. And I thank you for your attention to the presentation.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the chamber? Please step forward and again identify yourself. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Rich Lannon. Home address is 11 McGrath Road in Pelham. My offices are here in Nashua. Like Mary, I'm also on the Downtown Improvement Committee as well. Will not rehash what Mary Lou just said about our support from a committee standpoint. I also own a couple of properties on Main Street. And being on the Downtown Improvement Committee and in the previous committees that were involved in the sidewalks, in the pay and displays several years ago, I mean, Main Street was obviously the focus. But I think Mary Lou alluded to it as well. The side streets, it just wasn't the time, there wasn't the money, but we knew that some of the side streets, and West Pearl Street probably has by far the most active, the most activity, both on, on the drivability of West Pearl Street, the fact that the most restaurants, retailers, and we knew then, as we know now, that it needed to be done. And again, whether the Performing Arts Center was being built or not, I think Director Cummings will probably be here tonight with this presentation. We literally did a site walk, the Downtown Improvement Committee, I think it was just maybe a couple, 3 weeks before COVID hit, about looking at the lighting and the trees. Other streets too, but we said, boy, this street really needs work. And then COVID hit, and then it was kind of put on hold until we decided we need to get the study going, which is why the committee did that. The one other thing I'd like to mention is, just so you know, so West Pearl Street is West Pearl Street, but there's a couple of questions that have come to me, like what they call Garden Street, which is the alley behind, between the back of what is now the Performing Arts Center and Fort and Engage. That whole area, at that time we looked at, needed a lot of help too. But just so you know, that's not part of what Director Cummings is going before you. That is being handled with the budget of the Performing Arts Center. So Garden Street will be completely redone. As you look at it now, it has to be almost, but it's going to be redone up to the standards, what will probably end up, looking like on West Pearl Street or what Main Street looks like today. So that is not part of this project. That is being also done whether this project goes through or not. So thank you for your time and hope you have your support.
Thank you.
Good evening. Mary Ann Melizzi Golia, 2 Amber Road, Nashua, New Hampshire. As many of you know, I was sitting here in the former chamber. And as part of that, I was involved in planning and economic development. And I know much of the conversation about West Pearl Street has been, the Performing Arts Center. But historically, we've looked at that street as one way to improve walkability in the city and get people into downtown without cars. And so as we look at West Pearl Street, we also need to look beyond that and what's happening at the former site of Bronstein and the Pennachuck office buildings being there. So as you look beyond the end of West Pearl Street, look at the development that's happening there and think about the people who are going to be living and working there, who we want to be able to walk into town. So I think that's a piece that shouldn't be lost in all of this. And I think Director Cummings will probably speak to that. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm assuming that we have everybody in the chamber. I will now look to Zoom. We do have somebody with their hand raised. I recognize the face, although I see the name is different that's on the screen. So could you identify yourself, and you know the drill, so welcome.
Thank you. Lori Ortolano, 41 Berkeley Street. So I see the only item on the agenda is West Pearl Streetscaping. So am I correct that that's the item we can talk about right now?
Yes.
There's no other items. So the only thing I'm going to say, and I'm sure this will be looked at in the presentation, is that the road, Elm Street, that comes out and meets West Pearl Street is obviously a difficult turn to make when you come out and make that left, and you have the buses and the other vehicles that want to come in and make a turn on that street. It's really difficult. It's really tight, and it's a tough turn to make with traffic. And yeah, I don't know if that's going to be part of the redesign or the look, but that's the only comment I have, is with that turn in the intersection of Elm Street onto West Pearl Street. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else on Zoom like to take advantage of public comment? Seeing no hands, I will close the public comment section. We're expecting a presentation by Director Cummings this evening, but if I may just take a brief moment. First, I want to welcome the new members of the Board of Aldermen who have been assigned or by choice there to serve on the Infrastructure Committee, and welcome back old friends of the committee. Just a little brief history. somewhere the name got changed to infrastructure, but basically, the original, I think it was lands and buildings. So our authority has to deal with all the lands and buildings that the city so owns, except with the exception of the school department property, which is covered by the school department per se. So therefore, we're gonna, over the years, we're gonna be hearing many different things like this. One of our key presenters this evening is Director Cummings. We consider him most certainly an asset. He's gonna give us a lot of information on different projects that are gonna be coming forward that we'll get to hear in this particular committee. So again, I welcome you all. And Director Cummings, are you ready? And hopefully with no glitch?
Yeah, with no glitch, may I come up, please?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. So as I'm approaching, for the record, Tim Cummings, Director of Economic Development. And with me this evening, we have the design team who will actually be giving the presentation this evening. And before I hand it over to them, what I'd like to do is just give you a little orientation or recap in terms of what we're talking about this evening. So I'm going to share my screen now. Hopefully everyone will see it up on the monitors, and those who are participating remotely should be able to see it through Zoom. I wanted to make you all aware of the website that we have dedicated to this project. And essentially what this website is hopefully going to be used for is a tool for you all to help push information out to your constituents, and it is available for the residents of Nashua if they have an interest in this project. So originally the Nashua Center for the Arts project included a streetscaping component for West Pearl Street. However, due to the budget constraints, the street scoping was value engineered out of the project, as it was determined that it could be done at a later date as a separate matter if the city so desired. The City of Nashua's Downtown Improvement Committee, recognizing the importance of this project, opted to pursue the streetscaping of West Pearl Street on a parallel course and set aside money for the streetscaping design this year, I should say in 2021, which is what is the initiative that you're going to be hearing about this evening. Today, I'm hoping to just get some direction from you all that we're headed in, that we're headed in the right direction, hear your feedback, get a sense as to whether you like the design. Ultimately, if this is something that progresses, because right now we're still in the early stages of the design. If we are to complete final design this spring, we would be looking to execute on the program sometime in the summer or the fall. I would anticipate including the money in this year's operating budget. So just want you all to be aware of that. These will be separate conversations that proceed as we continue into the spring budget season, but I wanted to telegraph for you in advance, what you could potentially see coming down the pike. So also, before I hand it over to the design team, I wanted to just outline the project limits. So we're talking about West Pearl Street, which hopefully you can see my cursor on the screen showing you what we're talking about. And it's basically Main Street to Walnut Street. And then you have Elm Street being essentially the 50-yard line. We are studying just the Main to Walnut Street frontage on West Pearl Street. The design parameters that was given to the design team was we wanted to do no harm in terms of reversing the direction. So anything that we did in this streetscaping could be included in a reversal if the city so wished at a later point to reverse the direction of West Pearl Street. And I raised that issue because, as you just heard from the prior speaker, we did study at length the turning sight distances that come about when you're trying to turn onto West Pearl Street. And I fully understand the issues and the concerns because it is a very constrained area for turning movements. One of the best ways to address that actually is if and when we were to reverse West Pearl Street, your turning would be much easier to make a right off of Elm Street, going towards Main Street, because the sight distance is much better when you want to merge onto West Pearl Street to go east than as opposed to if you go west. But that is something that we are studying and we are very much cognizant of. And I would also say that we are anticipating a larger project coming down the pike with the state, and we have just started conversations with the New Hampshire Department of Transportation about connecting Central Street and West Pearl Street together and doing what we call the squaring off of the oval. And we started that initiative a couple of years back as a traffic calming measure to start the squaring off, and we've done that. And now we would be looking to actually do this whole intersection here with a squaring off this block to incorporate it better into the urban fabric. There's been talk about adding maybe a parking lot up here and talking about squaring this off down here and making a smoother transition from Central Street down onto West Pearl Street. And this all would work together. So this would be like phase one of a multi-phased project, and connecting Central to West Pearl. And because we'd be using state funding, this would be happening sometime, I would suggest, in design in 23, probably starting the project in 24, 25. But it will be what's referred to as a locally managed project. We would need to put 20% of the project in, the total of the total project cost. The state would pick up about 80% of the project. And so we are working with the state now to start to develop those contracts. I still need to connect up with the city's engineering department to make sure we're on track. But ideally, we would be looking to submit a request into the operating budget where we could set aside that $20,000 monies to do that project as well. Again, I just wanted to give you all a little bit of an orientation of the overall master plan of the area, because what you're going to be hearing about is really just the streetscaping aspect of West Pearl Street. So with my comments being concluded now, if I may, Mr. Chair, I want to hand it off to Ned Collier, who you may all know as the architect and lead designer in charge of the Performing Arts Center, who's been handling the design elements of the streetscaping project as a project manager for us. So if I could, Mr. Chair.
Yes, but if I may, Director Cummings, would you, in your guests' mind, as they, our guests make their presentation, if one of the members of the committee should have a question, can they ask through the chair, ask while the subject is still hot, and that way...
Absolutely.
Okay. So just ask permission and we'll ask if they will take your question. Alderman Jettie.
So in that regard, Mr. Chairman, could I ask a question of...
Yes, you may. Thank you, Alderman.
So you know, I look back and I see that a few years ago, I can't remember how many years ago, but it wasn't that many years ago, there was a traffic circulation study done. And that traffic circulation study recommended that we reverse the direction of, among others, West Pearl Street and Factory Street. And it seems like that study was put on a shelf someplace, and you know, nothing has happened with it. You know, I know we spent I don't know how much, but we spent some money doing that, and now here, I'm not sure. I mean, you said that this new study is going to provide for the ability to reverse direction if we so choose. But why are we putting that off? Why aren't we dealing with that reverse direction? And then you know, you talk about squaring off the Walnut Street Oval. You know, I've recently become enamored of roundabouts, you know, as a way of keeping traffic moving, getting traffic, you know, and I think that the roundabouts at South Main Street and Broad Street you know, have worked out pretty, you know, fairly well. I can see them, you know, as a possible application for some other areas to reduce congestion, to keep traffic moving, and avoid the excessive emissions that happen when you stop at an intersection. And if we're gonna square off the Walnut Street Oval, you know, I hope the next step isn't installing traffic lights, because that's very expensive. That slows down traffic. And so, having said that, do you have any reaction to what I just said?
Of course I do, Alderman Jettie. If I may, Mr.
No,
Chairman.
absolutely.
So the study that I believe you're referencing is the Vhp Circulation Study that was done.
Yes.
And everything that I'm talking about here is absolutely included in the study and was recommended that should be implemented. So that study was a very high-level planning type study that was done, really in partnership with the Broad Street Parkway, when they were looking at how best to bring all the vehicles in and out of the downtown with the Broad Street Parkway. And there was a recommendation to make it easier from here, Central Street, you know, when basically Broad Street Parkway changes over to Pine Street. Here, you kind of terminate, and it's very difficult to get from Central Street to Main Street. You have to really kind of know how to navigate this whole area. And so the VHB study said you really should reverse West Pearl Street, and you should straighten out this oval, and you should make it easier for people who are using the Broad Street Parkway, and more importantly, if you're spending $60 million, encouraging them to use the Broad Street Parkway to get people from here to here easier. And so that's why one of the last phases of this is a state-orientated type project where you would be looking to make that connection better for the downtown. I agree with you. I, as a rule of thumb, much more enjoy rotaries or roundabouts or circular type of movements than intersections for all the reasons that you've outlined. I don't know what the impacts will be or what we'll need to do for the squaring up of the oval. That is going to need to be studied, but it is definitely something that we should be addressing. Typically, the studies that will bring this about will tell us what we'll need to do to improve the area and the squaring off of the oval. The original thought process as to why we were doing it and how it got into the state project system was because there was a thought of reincorporating this area as a more traditional street grid because it would be pedestrian friendly. It would actually be better to use that type of formation as opposed to that roundabout concept because you want to calm the traffic. You want to slow the traffic down. In this type of built environment, as opposed to another type of roadway where you might be a little bit more out of the downtown area, where you don't want people necessarily sitting at a street light unnecessarily, a traffic light unnecessarily. So if you put a rotary or a roundabout in, you'll be able to process the cars in a much more environmentally type-friendly fashion. And that is absolutely true. The last comment I'll make about it is the circulation, which you had talked about, which is to do the circulation appropriately, you're going to need to, because of the volume of vehicles that get processed through this area, you can't just do one segment in isolation. You need to do it in tandem. So there has been a study that suggested West Pearl Street could be reversed. This means potentially that you would also reverse East Pearl Street. And that means that you'd flow the traffic down Temple Street and then down Factory Street and then on out and through. That is what you'd need to do in tandem, at least at this early preliminary design, or I shouldn't even say preliminary design, at this early engineering planning study that was done. As you get into it more, there could be analysis that gets done that says maybe you don't need to do it, but at least at this time, that was, it was suggested you'd need to do both segments. And the impacts that you'd have to make for that have been something that the city has not wanted to take on, because you'd be creating a lot of change. And people didn't necessarily want to do that change right away. They wanted to slowly tease out the idea and talk about it in these types of meetings for some time. I think we've done that now for at least 3 or 4 years. I would suggest we're probably getting to a point where we will need to actually make that type of improvement for the betterment of the city in the near future.
Could I just follow up?
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so I think that, you know, when you look at it, you know, from an overall, you know, high-level view, it just makes sense. When you're going from east to west, when you come down Temple Street, you know, we're all used to keeping to the right. You know, you would just stay to the right, go down, you know, Temple to Main to Factory, and going the, you know, the reverse direction. It would avoid the, you know, right now at Temple Street, you know, you've got a stop sign you've got to deal with because you're going against the natural flow. It just makes a lot of sense to me. And with, you know, I just viewed a thing with Senator Shaheen made a presentation to the New Hampshire Municipal Association about all this money that's you know, becoming available through, you know, I can't remember the name of it, but that, the new federal infrastructure bill that was adopted by Congress. You know, there's a lot of money available for a lot of things, and it would, you know, it seems like this would be a great opportunity, a great time to do this, because I think there's probably, you know, a lot of federal money that would be helpful to get this done. So, thank you.
Thank you, and if I may, Mr. Chair?
Absolutely.
Alderman Jettie, it's funny you bring that up, because what I would love to share with you is that actually Senator Shaheen actually put this project in as a project that she sponsored in the Appropriations Committee's Transportation Bill. And we're waiting to see if we are successful in receiving the federal funds. But to your point, it'd be great if there's a federal infrastructure monies that come to actually do this project. But we've been talking to her staff about it, and they saw the vision, they saw the wisdom in it, and so it made it successfully through committee, needs to make it through the entire Congress and then still signed by the president, but at least made it over the first hurdle.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Cummings, I do have one little point. If you could just briefly explain to people that may or may not be familiar, but as you know, with the oval smack in the middle of it, used to be municipal and county courthouse, but that's no longer the case. It's a private enterprise. Anything that we'll be doing as far as potential construction with the oval will be done on municipal property, correct?
Well, that's a good question, Alderman O'Brien. I'm going to just zoom in a little bit here. I would say for the most part, you're correct. I would be remiss not to point out that over here, to do the straightening out of West Pearl Street, right here, you're going to see potentially some little bit of encroachment on private property. This is Bob's Tires, as you may or may not know. It's owned by George Cadis. He's well aware of this project, and so he knows that this may be a conversation that will come at some point. But to your point over here with this, yeah, this shouldn't be affecting anything. We're going to actually assimilate in the land, and in theory, if you wanted to, you'd create some development opportunity as you release the land from its current usage and provide a squared off rectangle for potential development. As I said, there's been conversations over here on the more northerly side about potentially putting in a parking lot. That's something that we've asked our parking consultant to study. And then here on the southerly side, you might be able to put in a small, very small type of development if the land was available after you got done with the infrastructure project. If you didn't want to do a parking lot, you'd have a much larger spot right here if you wanted to do a development. But those are conversations that we would need to have as time goes on. But with all that being said, I know we have a group here that wants to talk.
Yeah,
about
I was
Pearl
going to
Street.
say, why don't you introduce your first guest, please?
So I'm going to stop sharing my screen again, and then again, hand it off to Ned Collier.
Thank you, Director Cummings, and good evening to the board. I'll be very brief and introduce our design team. Matt Gillen is representing Gregory Lombardi Design, our landscape architect, and Joanne Coppinger is with Rist Frost Shumway, our civil engineer. And with that, Matt, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Ned. Good evening, everyone. Thank you again for your time tonight. As Ned said, I will be sharing my screen and running through the presentation that we've been developing over the past couple of months. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So as we were discussing a little bit earlier, we've been working with Tim and Amy, Ned, Joanne, and the whole RFS team to kind of kick off this project and begin to look at how to, begin to capitalize off some of the energy that's being invested into the street with the new Performing Arts Center, and to really, think about how to improve West Pearl so that it functions better for pedestrians, but also so that it becomes more of a destination for the city. But we've also been working through the design with all the city agencies, DPW, Planning Board, Fire, Transportation, as well as the various utility companies, to begin to sort through all of the different aspects of coordination that go into a project like this, which, as you're aware of, is quite a lot. So without further ado, I'll kind of walk through our most recent presentation, which kind of takes you through the goals and the conceptual design, which, as mentioned earlier by Tim and Ned, is a conceptual kind of progress shot right now as to where we are. But again, to reiterate, this is about kind of injecting some vibrance into the streetscape through greening the street, improving site lighting, looking at the width of the sidewalk, and maybe trying to reprioritize pedestrians a little bit differently in terms of their relationship to cars in this location. And hopefully making a bit of a destination for the city in that location. So let me just jump in here and pull the screen up. Everyone see that?
Yeah, very good.
And I'm actually going to read through these because I think it's really important to put these words out there. We do start most of our projects by talking about what the mission, what the values, what the different kind of elemental functions of the project are going to be. So the mission here is to enhance the value of the city's creative and economic life by engaging artistic, educational, and commercial neighbors through excellent design practices and programs. The broader vision to create a distinctive, dynamic, and safe urban destination for locals, tourists, patrons, and business owners alike. Our values: collaboration, education, community inclusion, equity, and innovation. So really quickly, those three things really inform the design process at large. They're how we make value judgments. They're how we talk about the different elements, what's important to the public, what's important to business owners, to the city at large. So they are really important things that we start off most of our projects in talking about. Again, the project goals: greening of the street experience. Right now, as most of you are aware, there's, I think, a total of 3 trees on the entire stretch of the road. Not exactly probably what would be considered a beautiful streetscape condition. Number 2, enhancing pedestrian and vehicular safety. I wouldn't say the street is necessarily unsafe at this time. There's just a bit of an imbalance between how things are prioritized. The street is definitely more geared towards cars at this moment. Cars, parking. The sidewalks are, I would say, because of the condition of the street, the condition of the building frontage, there's some irregularities in ADA compliance that meet between the different building fronts and the sidewalks. The sidewalks are brick in most locations. They're probably not the easiest to pass in some spots. And I'll show you some sections through the street that show those different widths and conditions. And then number 4, creating a destination, creating a driver for businesses who want to come to the city to set up next to this new Performing Arts Center. Businesses that have been there for years and that will continue to be there, and making sure that they're They feel comfortable with things like site lighting, safety at night. They feel, comfortable with spilling out into the street with things like site furnishings or outdoor cafe space, but really making this street have its own identity within the larger city. And then down below, we have a list of ranked investment priorities. And these are things that, when we look at an overall project that has a fixed budget, how do we prioritize which items are most important for us? And so it is very much something we have to make choices when it comes to money. So starting with really elemental things like planting and soil, and then moving down the list, sidewalk pavement, curbing, using a mix of new and salvage stone for the curbing, pole lights, roadway improvements and pavement markings, street furnishings, irrigation for the new trees, and then potentially some gateway or district signage that would punctuate the street and give it some identity as you move through the district. As Tim pointed out, the project area is between Walnut and Main along West Pearl. Not too much here to go into, so I'll move along. When looking at streetscapes, we always think of them in a 24-hour cycle. There are things that are alive and people are circulating through them at all times, maybe more so during the day than at night, but it's important they function well in both conditions. So, during the daytime, we like to see things like a consistent tree canopy, light fixtures that have some sort of identity to them. They don't necessarily need to feel period, like to a certain time period in history is what I'm saying, but they need to have some sort of identity that gives the street a bit of vibrance. Things like site furnishing, pavement markings, accessible surfaces that are level and even and don't provide trip hazards or areas where people shoveling might get caught up, and then banners or identity signage that really help to give a visual importance to the street. And then at night, there's also things that we like to look at, like consistent light levels. Very important. Right now, there's probably not a consistent light level across the length of the street that would feel safe to most people. Same thing with tree canopies. We like to have tree canopies elevated to a level of about 7 feet so that they're not obstructing views, so you can get a nice clear shot down the sidewalk. You see people coming at you or standing behind you, it's very important. Clear pavement markings that are visible at night is a very important thing. And then opportunities to actually celebrate the architecture of the street through illuminated building fronts or uplighting. All these things come together to really make a cohesive whole that through all hours of the day is really, really valuable to the city. And then the first diagram here I'll move into is an assessment of existing conditions on the site. So I'll just explain briefly the different colors and what they stand for. So the blue stripes represent current parking spots. Green circles are trees. Highlighted in dashed blue are parking areas outside of West Pearl Street. And then magenta arrows indicate rough traffic flow circulation, as we were just talking about before we started. And then down below here in the corner is approximate quantities for where we stand with counts on Pearl Street. So we're looking at about 38 parking stalls, 17 pole lights, and a home run 3 trees on the length of the street. So what we're hoping is to do a little bit better there. As you can see, the width of the street is primarily punctuated by parking on both sides, with the exception of the stretch of road in front of the Arts Center and these businesses here. I'll take you on a little sectional walk down the street. So each of these areas, there's a corresponding site section that cuts through the street and explains the different widths and the relationships between sidewalks and building fronts. So all the way from Walnut down to Main, just 4 quick looks at the different streetscape conditions. Here almost at the corner, at the intersection, the variation is pretty simple. You'll see variations in the widths of the north and south sidewalks. So if you pay attention to the 7'6" side and the 6'9" side, you'll see that kind of grow and shrink. The building face is not even as you go down West Pearl. The businesses kind of come in and out into the sidewalk at different depths. That's one of the kind of design criteria that we're working with RFS and the utility companies to help simplify a little bit. But the idea is that the curb line is what's consistent with the new design. So we can't control the building faces as much as we'd like to, but the curb we can certainly set in a location that is consistent from east to west. So you'll see here we have 2 travel lanes, a parking lane, and then I'll just slide us down the street a little bit. Sidewalk gets a little more wide. It gets wider on the wider on the south side, a little narrow on the north side. Again, 2 travel lanes and a parking condition. And then as we pull down in front of the bump out, right about where Elm Street comes in, we have a condition where there's parking, 2 travel lanes, and then again, further down, West Pearl, again, parking and 2 travel lanes. So there are conditions where there's consistent parking, consistent lanes, but the goal here is the pedestrian clearly isn't winning with the space we have. We have, a variation between 6 feet and 6 feet and 9 feet on the south, and maybe 9 to 11 feet on the north. And I think we can do a little bit better with what we're proposing for adding pedestrian value to the street. So this is the concept we've worked through with the team. The idea here is to, again, consolidate parking into areas at both ends of West Pearl and provide more space for pedestrians to spill out into the sidewalk. The diagram is basically the same as the first. You'll see the parking is indicated in these blue stripes. Trees are the small green dots, spaced out at about 20 feet on center. We're still working on the spacing. That's very much going to depend on the existing utilities and how we work with them. The yellow dots would be site lighting. So again, a much higher frequency of street lighting down the length of the road. And then highlighted in red boxes are maybe opportunities for things like public art, places where the public can engage with local artists that could come in during seasonal street festivals or anything like that, where there's an opportunity for the public to actually fill these spaces, spend more time than just getting kind of back and forth to businesses, but actually create spaces for events. And then again, parking areas highlighted in blue, just to emphasize that there is a lot of adjacent parking, not necessarily on West Pearl, but very close by that is accessible for business owners. And then down below the recount, about again, 15, 16 spaces, 24 pole lights and 41 trees. So I think this might be a good time to, if there are any comments about the proposed, happy to hear them now, or if you'd like to keep going, I can kind of begin to break down the rest of this if you see fit.
Yes, Alderman Dodd, sorry.
Yeah, I have a few questions.
Sure.
Actually, I'll go backwards with some. First one I have is, I can't read what it says, but that arrow between the School Street development and Pearl Street, that's the Dickle Rose Memorial. And that had funding that took care of that walkway. Are we thinking of doing anything with that would require getting some permissions from the LaRose family?
Again, are you talking about between,
See, right there.
Yeah, just west of Cranes and
So-
Mary's house.
we're not at that level of design yet. I think it would be, we haven't studied that to this point yet. So I can't say that we would be doing anything where we would need
Yeah,
to get
because
quote unquote
there's a
permission.
memorial there, there's a mural there,
Right.
I'm not sure how much they paid for the improvements, but, change my glasses. There we go. So,
I think the intent is really just to identify where there may be opportunities for future development.
Correct.
okay.
But not really part of the scope of the work.
So the trees that are going to be planted, when we did the trees on Main Street, one of the reasons we had to cut a lot of the trees down was because the root systems had totally messed up the infrastructure and gone into the buildings and everything else. So I would assume that we would be using small height trees with a enclosed root ball, so the roots can't.
Correct. They would be in tree wells, and I'll show you a little bit more about the tree type, which is a columnar tree, kind of tall and skinny, so it doesn't get too wide in those locations.
Okay.
But the utility coordination is a very big part of this.
Right.
So I would say that the number and regularity of spacing of trees is something that's going to change a lot as we dig into this more. You may be looking at, 2/3 of this quantity of trees when this is all said and done. Again, we've heard some comments about the trees, both from the fire department in terms of accessing building facades, visibility, all very valid concerns when it comes to street trees. But there are definitely ways to work them in among utilities and space them out so that they work well with building facades and seeing things like addresses and site signs. So yeah.
So, if I may continue.
Follow up? Absolutely.
Yes. I know we haven't got into the final designs, but are we thinking about having benches, maybe
Yeah.
granite benches that can't be moved?
Yeah, and you'll see some examples in a little bit later.
And for people to sit on. And have we thought about, well, I'm gonna go to this other one first. Some of the utility poles are right on the edge of the street, and they can be a real pain. So we're thinking of, moving those poles a bit. Of course, we just moved some of them down towards Main Street, and that was a major undertaking.
At this time, there's no thought in moving the poles. Joanne, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the goal with moving the sidewalk line out is to put the trees in front of the utility poles so that there's no relocations required.
Okay, and have we thought about any type of incentive to building owners from the city to help them improve their fronts so that A, they're more attractive, B, they're not bumping out and that things are smoother?
Yeah, yes, actually, we have at least one building owner who we've talked to that has expressed an interest if the Office of Economic Development ran another facade program, they would take advantage of it. I'm hoping to get a couple more, and if I know that there's the demand, then you'd see the similar type program that we've done in the past presented to you again.
And I guess my last question is probably not part of this, but have we had any discussions with the owner of the previous bank that has that parking lot right there about using those parking spaces in the evening?
Great question, and yes, and we're in very early conversations on that.
Might be part of an incentive with something else he wants to do in the city.
But that is understood very loud and clear to me.
Okay, I'm all set.
Thank you. Alderman Como.
And I would suggest that you sort of get through the balance of it. That may answer a number of the questions that are coming up.
Right, we've thought of everything, right, Ned?
That's right. That's our job.
So just some imagery to kind of inspire us. And think about
Excuse me, sir. Matt, if I may, we do have just one question and from another alderman, if I can get him in, please.
Absolutely.
Alderman Como?
Yes, thank you. If you could go back, thanks. Just looking at the numbers regarding the parking.
Yep.
Based on this proposal, am I correct in assuming this eliminates roughly 2/3 of the existing parking along West Pearl Street? Do we have a plan in place to add more spots somewhere else? I know one of the concerns regarding the Public Arts Center and a topic that comes up when we discuss barriers is a lack of parking downtown. So is there a plan to relocate those, roughly 2/3 of those spots to somewhere else nearby?
So I anticipated this question coming, and on the call as well is Andy Hill, our consultant, our parking management consultant, and happy to have him address that question now. But I also figure we'll probably be talking about that this particular topic a little bit later on as well. Matt, could you stop sharing your screen? We can't see you while you have your slide deck up.
Oh.
Great, thanks. I say that because I believe Andy is now on and will be able to address your question.
Hey, Andy.
Hi. So just to give folks an overview, within the stretch that we're talking about right now, there's a total of 38 spaces or meters going up and down that. 11 of them are the shorter term, higher cost zone 1 meters. The rest of them our Zone 2 meters as far as that goes. And in terms of utilization, what we saw when we were out doing observations in October on a very nice Friday and a very nice Saturday, there were, within those 38 spaces, somewhere between 22 and 30 cars parked, according to the time of day that you were looking at. So when we talk about going from 38 down to 16, is that correct?
Correct.
14 standard and two handicap. We are talking potentially about displacement of up to 14 vehicles.
Correct.
Based on this observation. Now, a couple of things to caveat. These observations were conducted when the barriers were in place, depending on what happens with that program. We think that some of the utilization that we saw was driven primarily because there was not capacity up and down Main Street here. The barrier program took about 60 spaces that might otherwise be available offline, most of them on Main Street. So the observations that we had of what were utilization levels between 58 and 79% could have been goosed, for lack of a better term, by lack of availability on Main Street. We're actually going to test that Valentine's Day weekend by going out and doing yet another set of counts up and down Main Street, the side streets, to see what the area looks like now that the School Street lot has gone offline and the barriers are down. So we'll be able to come back and report to you at a later date on what that looks like. That said, as you look a little bit broader at the blocks above and below, at the blocks as a whole that abut the section of West Pearl Street here, and you look at utilization as a whole on those blocks here, we saw utilization levels for public garages and lots that touch both sides of West Pearl Street in the neighborhood of anywhere from as low as 25% to as high as 72%, but with availability in those public lots of as little as 30 spaces or as many as 80 spaces, which is to say there is capacity just on 2 of those blocks to capture those displaced vehicles if we can't find another place to create more capacity along the way here. And then somebody had brought up the question of possibly leveraging shared use agreements in some of the private facilities that are in the area. There is a substantial amount of availability in those private facilities. Typical utilization there is 50% or less, and you're looking at a low of 67 available spaces, a high of 80 spaces for the private lots that are contained in the blocks adjacent to West Pearl Street. And as the gentleman noted, if we could execute a shared use agreement for that, that's low-hanging fruit and a very quick way to pick up that capacity to offset whatever displacement we're looking at. Last point is the numbers that I'm tossing out are really looking at just the blocks where there is parking along West Pearl Street, due south of, and on the block, same block, I believe, the Performing Arts Center is going in. You also have City Hall and the Elm Street Garage. There is a tremendous amount of available capacity in the Elm Street Garage for transient parkers at all times. It would be a half a block off of what you're looking at, in terms of accommodation if you're parking on West Pearl Street right now. So keep that in mind as well when we're talking about the loss of the supply and potential displacement of users. We have a lot of different buckets, for lack of a better term, to catch those folks in if they end up getting dislodged because we have reduced the parking capacity along the street.
Thank you.
Also, Director Cummings, if I may, also to consider, Mr. Hill, is the completion of the project of the School Street project when that is done. And that will be also an addition because there will be parking underneath that, correct?
That's correct.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could, I'm going to ask Matt to bring up his screen again, and we can continue on with the presentation.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks. Thanks, Tim. So just moving on to some of the inspirational imagery we've been showing, kind of the goals maybe we're trying to capture here on this site. A consistent feeling of lighting, trees in dedicated tree pits or curbed tree conditions, benches, seating for outdoor cafe space, but ways to bring the public out into the street and not have them feel like they're at risk of being adjacent to automobiles or businesses feeling like they don't have adequate space outside the door to even circulate. And there are very distinct zones that are required for circulation. You know, the circulation space between cafe seating and building fronts is one of the things we're looking carefully at as well. But the proposal here, as we look down the street, you know, there's north and south conditions along the sidewalks that are minimum and maximum. So kind of the worst and the best case scenarios, I guess, is one way to talk about it. So, you know, looking at the area on the north side, just by shifting the curb in, we can achieve some pedestrian space, what we call an amenity space, amenity strip. That would include the tree planting, as well as benches or areas for cafe tables and seating, as well as maintaining that distance, that 5-foot distant minimum between building face and those zones. And then we do have locations along the north sidewalk where there are potentially some tight spots, but we're also kind of keeping an eye on those areas to make sure we still have minimum passable widths between, you know, 4 feet for locations where there is a utility pole. And then, but overall the widths will be much wider than they are now. And then looking just down at the south side, minimum and maximum. South side's a little bit of a different condition. It does get down a little bit skinnier, plus or minus 5 feet 6, with the parking and the travel lane included. Just here in sections showing a street tree condition. The street trees will be placed so that they can, you know, again, avoid those utility pole locations that are, the utility poles are on the north side, but on the south side, the street trees will be placed so that cars can still, you know, kind of pull up and open doors if they need to, you know, people need to jump out. So they'll be further set back from the curb face enough that that's not a problem. So a bit of an improvement here, just with, you know, kind of shrinking the travel lane a little bit and expanding the sidewalk condition for those amenity areas. And then I'd just like to look at some plans that show those widths and the different things we can kind of fit into those zones. 2 different possibilities for tree pits. Again, to the concern about the trees impinging on utilities, the trees will be put in dedicated locations and very carefully examined with the existing utilities to make sure there aren't any future issues. Same thing with looking at the paving for the sidewalk. We want to make sure that there's no heaving or heaving is kept to a minimum inside the tree pit with the tree grate. There's 2 different ways we can handle tree pits. You see here a raised condition, a curved condition, and then in the amenity zone, a potential granite curb, a brick edge, and I know there's been mixed success with the brick edge in the city, so we're looking at that as an option. And then opportunities in this strip here with the trees for amenities like single seat benches, lighting, and then the other way to handle tree locations is with a flush condition, which is sometimes easier to handle with snow removal because you're not bumping into a curb with a shovel. This invites, this is definitely easier to keep the plants healthy, I would say. And this condition, the tree grade, is a bit more limiting with what you can actually plant in those zones. It's pretty much kept to a tree. No additional shrubs or perennials can be planted in these zones just because of traffic and circulation. So these are flush conditions, much easier to maintain. And again, different ways we can handle identifying the amenity zone, either through a smaller strip of brick or something a little bit wider that would really delineate that zone in a different way. And the reason we do that is twofold. It's just to kind of break up the monotony of a very wide concrete sidewalk and also give it a bit of identity so that people know I'm going to step out of the travel lane and into the amenity zone. And then just looking at some ways we could accommodate site furnishing. These are just two quick scenarios that show different setups. So if there is a restaurant or a cafe that would like to put seating out, this amenity zone, which averages around 6 to 8 feet, could accommodate some different scenarios, some stand-up tables, and then maintaining that very important passable zone between the building face and the amenity strip at I believe a 5 or 6 foot minimum is what was requested. And then if you wanted to look at more standard cafe seating, tables and chairs instead of a stand-up condition, they're a little bit more space consumptive in terms of size, but they still would work with those conditions. And then just a little bit more about the trees. We are talking about what's called a columnar tree or a fastigiate tree that does stay more narrow in form. And the reason we use these trees is both to avoid any potential conflicts with utility poles, overhead wires, and also to avoid the tree projecting into the street. I know there's a lot of commercial traffic that goes up and down the street with bus circulation, delivery vehicles that have a potential to clip the trees and make them a bit of a maintenance problem. But the goal with the columnar trees is that they don't extend out too far into the street envelope, as you might say. These two types of trees also are, I would say, visually important for a lot of reasons, but they would definitely give the street a bit of a unique identity. A lot of times we'll use a single species of tree on a streetscape to really help people recognize that this is a certain district or a certain area, and that these two trees have performed well in urban conditions and the light conditions that we have on site. Very hardy urban trees that are easier to take care of, don't have a lot of disease susceptibility, and would be a very good choice for these kind of narrow sidewalk conditions. And then again, some very heavy seating so that we don't have to worry about things moving or walking away when we're not around. And we're looking at seating that is more appropriate for a single use instead of longer benches that can sometimes encourage people to stay for longer times. These would be, kind of interspersed in that amenity zone, depending on the use that's desired in front of each business. But the goal here is that they are, again, very heavy and kind of accommodate a single person to sit or to sit and wait while someone might be in the store shopping around, but not long-term seating opportunities. And then a light fixture that kind of blends a bit of history, historical feeling, but more contemporary lines. Again, we're not trying to hit a certain or recreate a certain time period here on the street. I think with the energy the Performing Arts Center is bringing, the light fixtures want to kind of continue that down the street. And I think a fixture like this, which feels a little bit historic, but also very new, is something that would be a nice addition to the street and help give that consistent light level down the length of the road that is missing right now. And they do come in single pole heads or doubles. We'd probably consider a double pole head, maybe intersections where, for instance, maybe at the intersection of Elm Street where there might be a little bit, a need for a little bit more lighting. But for the most part, we're thinking of a single pole head fixture.
Quick question.
Yeah.
The city did change to LED, and these look like LED, correct?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
And then something we always like to talk about whenever we're thinking about ways to make a street feel unique and pedestrian friendly are things like parking for bicycles, parking for electric scooters, pay stations for parking, cars, a lot of these things that start to feel like sometimes clutter in a streetscape condition. There are ways that we can choose different fixtures that actually feel unique and lend a bit of playfulness to the streetscape, which really, I think, is a feeling that I think the street has right now is this sort of artsy vibe that we would want to pick up on and try to enhance if we can. So street furnishings can be very basic. They can also be a little bit more fun to play with if you'd like to do that. So that's something we just wanted to bring up here. And then the kind of the overall important idea of integrating local and regional artists into the design of whether it's individual public art installations or murals, but there's a definite way to integrate interaction with streetscape design, and that's something that we're going to make sure we do as we move through this process. And then one idea that we did have as lending identity to the street would be the idea to create two gateways on either end of the street as a way of almost bookending the streetscape design itself. So these two areas on Pearl and Main could be marked in some way with either a bollard or an illuminated column as a way to announce this specific district to the town. So I think that's most of it. I don't know if there are any questions for me specifically about parking or anything for Tim about next steps. We can happily chat through any of that.
If I could, Mr. Chair, Matt, if you could stop sharing your screen, just so we can see you. Just want to end the conversation and the formal remarks by making sure that this body knows that this wasn't developed in isolation. There was many conversations that led up to this proposal. I believe the design team walked the West Pearl Street area in the early fall. I believe even Mr. Lannon joined them on that walk and spoke to a lot of the business owners and the abutters along the streetscape. We held a community meeting where we invited abutters and local stakeholders who would have an interest in this to preview the presentation, to solicit their comments and feedback. And then we've also incorporated a lot of the departments and city notes into the presentation, all with the combination of course, this being a public presentation where we would very much look forward to hearing your feedback, but then also make it clear that we want to get the feedback of the general public as well as we're continuing to design. But what we're really looking for today is guidance as to whether we're heading in the right direction. We have some constraints that we need to work through. We're trying to balance it to give everyone as much as what they want. That is very difficult because there are a lot of competing interests, but I think the proposal that you just saw and the plan that you just saw makes it very clear we did our best effort to accommodate everyone's wishes and sentiments thus far.
Okay, that being said, if I may, I don't think we need a formal vote or anything else like that. So, but I'm going to put in a formal motion that we not discuss it, that we let Director Cummings know on what we're doing. Then open up your discussion for your particular questions, your concerns of what you want to do. So the informal motion will be to give direction to Director Cummings whether we support this project. And I would like to give it the affirmative, just for the point of discussion. So Alderman Dow, the discussion is over.
Yeah, I would, if you want a motion, I'd make a motion to give Director Cummings permission to continue to explore this and come back with more details later. And the discussion would be that we support it by affirming to this motion.
Okay, the motion before us is to formally notice Director Cummings to carry on forward with this particular project. Any discussion on the motion at this point? Alderman Jettie, yes.
Yeah, so I've noticed during the summertime, I've noticed an odor from the sewer system, the manholes, the drainage things on the street, and I would hate us to be accused of putting, to borrow someone else's expression, lipstick on a pig. So I don't know when the last time, what the schedule is for, street construction, paving, repaving. I don't know if this would include sidewalk construction, but is there an opportunity here for us to fix whatever problem, whatever's causing that odor, you know, to fix that. And also, and while we're doing all of this, wouldn't this be a great opportunity to bury those wires? You know, eliminate the poles and put the wires underground, like we did on Main Street.
I think I can answer maybe both, and if I could try to, and then I'll concede to you, Director Cummings. But from my experience on the fire department, when Nashua was built, and the downtown is extremely old, when it came to be built, the current sewer system is a combination system. In other words, stormwater goes directly into the same, you know, becomes sewer water and gets treated at the sewage treatment plant. Not the best operation because we got to pay to rain, snow, melt, and everything else ends up at the sewage treatment plant. In the summertime, when there's periods of drought, that's when you probably get that offensive odor more than others because there's not a P-trap system such as that you have in your kitchen sink or underneath your lavatory in your bathroom. And that's the odor that the people find offensive. To correct that problem would be, modernization would be going to way other parts of the city, which you would have a drainage for the weather conditions such as snow melt and rainwater, and then a separate system for sewer, such as is in more modern type of neighborhoods. That would be a tremendous cost, and it's mostly, fortunately, it's only in the downtown and the older sections of the city that is affected with that. And then with the electrical, I think Director Cummings is going to turn to you because they did discuss that with the Performing Arts Center of trying to get some of that cabling down, and I'll let him bring up that dollar amount.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, as Alderman O'Brien was saying, we have a combined system, which you may or may not know. To modernize that system, it's hundreds of millions of dollars. It's a whole separate project from this. It is definitely something that we know and are well aware of. What I can say to you positively though, and this is actually something for the general public, which you may not know, but if you do experience that odor, you can report that to DPW, particularly our water treatment plant, and it's a maintenance issue, and they will actually go out and they will treat the individual pipe that you identify, and they will, it's a short-term solution, but it is one that will hopefully mitigate the issue. So I would encourage you and others, it's something I learned actually this summer as well, that there is this service that the city provides where if you call it in or report it to DPW, they will dispense a maintenance crew and treat the problem area. Relative to what I refer to as the tucking of the utility poles underground, that is from a streetscaping perspective, one of, typically a highest priority and has always been one of my highest priorities. Before we started this project, we had lengthy conversations with Eversource, who is the entity that owns the poles along West Pearl Street. And they made it abundantly clear that this project would grow to be exponentially larger, something in the order of magnitude of 3 to 4 to 5 times what we were originally thinking that this project would be, because of the cost that it takes to actually put the infrastructure underground. Putting aside their maintenance and operational issues that they raise that makes it challenging for them, that they not really are keen to seeing it happen, the cost would have to be borne on the city of Nashua. And taking on this project I thought was expensive enough. I didn't want to push my luck to try to suggest we do that. I would suggest we would leave it to the next generation of streetscaping, because I believe that this is a good project for the next 20, 30 years. But I think in 20, 30 years, you're going to come back and redo this again, and you'd be in a better position to actually take on that infrastructure improvement.
Okay, Alderman Jettie, follow up?
Yes, so at some point, we did that to Main Street. You know,
Yeah.
when I raised this and people talk to me about how grand a scale it would be and how impossibly expensive, I think, we've done it in the past, we could do it again. This seems like a good opportunity with all of this federal money becoming available, but if I could turn to another issue.
If I may.
Yeah, go ahead, Director Cummings.
I would be happy to go out and cost that and present it, come back to you and present that number to you. Ultimately, if that's something that you endeavor to do, we will add that into the project. But I just wanted to caution you that, I have a vision that this project is, a certain amount of money, because I'm trying to be very conservative in my approach. It's going to just really accentuate what this project becomes. And the last thing I would want to do is scare anyone off of making this type of improvement because it becomes too ambitious and people get scared off because of the price tag. That was the reason why, Alderman Jettie, I counseled the design team to go in this direction, because I didn't want the conversation to end before we even got out of the gate.
Right, I understand.
Yeah, Director Cummings, I think Alderman Jerry brings up a good point, but it'll be non-binding, just something that we could just take a look at. To the best, I'm going to use my invented word of a guesstimation,
Sure.
I think that would be adequate, because I think that burying of the cable was looked at with the Performing Arts Center. So I think you have a fairly good idea with that. The second thing Alderman Jettie did bring up, and that this will, I know the answer, but you will coordinate this with the Public Works in the repaving. So when this project is completed, paving will be done at that particular time, and it's
Yes, absolutely correct.
more efficient of
This has been done lockstep with the engineering and DPW department. They actually supplied the survey that we're using to build this design off of, and the engineering department has actually been a big integral internal part of this project so far.
Okay. Further discussion, Alderman Dowd.
Yeah, just a couple points. One, if you put the utilities underground, it has to be a big enough conduit that people will walk through it to maintain. The other thing is, it's not just the electricity. There's fiber optics, there's telephone, there's Comcast cable, and even coordinating all those companies at one time is a major effort. So it would be a major dig of the street to get that buried underneath, and then it's going to connect back above ground. And the other thing is, I know that Pearl Street's on the paving radar, and I know that the gas lines and the water lines have been replaced. I don't know about the sewerage, but they don't pave till all of those have been done, and then there's a 5-year moratorium. That's why they haven't paved it yet, because with anything that we're going to do, they want to make sure that's done before they do the repaving.
And Alderman Dowd, you triggered my thought process. Let's not forget on West Pearl Street, there is a major telephone distribution center, and God only knows what cabling goes into there for those of us that are still stuck to a copper landline, so. Alderman Jettie.
So I had another point, but to Alderman Dowd's point, when you talk about this conduit that people can walk through, is that the case on Main Street? Is there a conduit in Main Street that people
Yes.
can walk into?
It'd be impossible to maintain the lines if you didn't have that.
Huh. That'd be an interesting tour to the,
They might let you get down in there.
Oh,
and crawl
no,
through it.
no, it's,
like the catacombs.
well, it's not like what you think. It's piping that wires can go through, that you pull the wire through to separate sewer. It looks like a sewer cover, but that's basically it.
But Alderman Dowd said you could walk.
And
could
I
walk
don't
through.
know
Oh, there
about
was a
Main
section?
Street, but typically, in the big cities, they're so long that you have to
Yeah.
be able to get down there to maintain it. Because if you have a short or a fire, the only way you can maintain it is to dig the whole thing up.
I know the fire department has a lot of cabling in there as well because of the fire alarm box
Fire alarm
system.
system.
And also, the fire department does pull the fiber optic that does exist, so there is, I know they spent a lot of time beneath this main street, you know, so, and doing such.
So if I could,
Anything else follow up, Alderman
yeah,
Jettie?
Another point, so I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name, Mr. Consultant.
Matt.
Matt, one of the photos you showed where were outside restaurants, you know, you showed, you know, where people could stand up, you know, there was a thing you could stand up and eat, and then there was, you know, sitting down areas. And are any of those, you know, built in such a way to provide safety? One of the issues that we've been dealing with here is when we provided for additional outdoor dining in the, you know, actually in the street to assist the restaurants in town. The issue of safety for people sitting down at these outdoor restaurant tables came up. And so we ended up with these jersey barriers to protect them. You know, those photos that you showed, are those more you know, better designed safety barriers, or do they have nothing to do with safety?
I think the short answer is most of those conditions are shown on the sidewalk surface. I think a lot of the COVID-inspired dining, they call them parklets. They took over parallel parking spots, and a lot of times the jersey barrier was installed because they were actually sitting on the roadway surface. These dining areas would be protected from vehicular traffic by the raised curb condition that would be separating the street surface and the sidewalk surface.
Okay, thank you.
But if there was additional safety, the feeling that there was additional protection needed for those areas, we would probably suggest something like a vehicular bollard. I think the picture you're referring to had some kind of fencing, I would call it. But from a functionality standpoint, a bollard, a vehicular impact rated bollard would be the next level of protection that we would suggest for that, but probably not necessary in these areas. The jersey barrier was something that kind of functioned because cars were still driving on the same level as the sidewalk. Excuse me, same level as the cafe seating.
Thank you.
All set, Alderman Jettie?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Alderman Dow.
Yeah, a couple other quick things. I believe this is going to just tie into the scaping that we're doing around the Performing Arts Center, like from Fort Engage to Main Street. I believe that's going to be a wider sidewalk because of all the pedestrian traffic and possibly people lining up to pay to go in.
Yeah.
I thought I'd throw that in. The other thing is our economic director keeping in mind that once the Performing Arts Center is open, that much like in Manchester, the businesses along Pearl Street may change. There's 14 restaurants within 2 blocks of the Palace Theater. So when people are going down there, you know, there's a couple now, there'll be more. And there'll maybe other types of retail businesses that'll take advantage of all the foot traffic. So just keep that in mind when we're thinking about this project. The other thing is, having traveled quite a bit in Europe, when they have restaurants outside, they don't use jersey barriers. They use very ornamental bollards. It's very artistic, but if a car hits it, you're not going to hit the people. But it adds to the escaping.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, that's because Europe's not adjacent to the fine drivers of the state of Massachusetts.
Probably worse.
Go ahead, yes, I'm sorry. I just made it fun. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I'm clear also from the illustrations, is the intention, I know now West Pearl goes from, does it start at 2 lanes and then goes down to 1 travel lane? Is it going to be 1 travel lane the entire length of this project?
I'll let Matt, could you speak to
Yeah,
that?
it's two.
So it'll be two?
Two travel lanes, and then in some locations, parking on the third side.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Alderman Theobald?
Yeah, I know I'm not part of the committee, but I just.
Oh, no, you're welcome to speak.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Mr. President.
yes.
Or thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say that, I've been driving down West Pearl Street for about 35 years, and it's always been clunky. Ms. Ortolano is exactly right, that left turn on Elm Street is brutal. And so I think, and the oval and that whole section there has always been clunky. So I think this is great. The one thing I was worried about was the trees, and Alderman Dowd had asked that question, just because I know there's a lot of trees in the city that are building up the sidewalks, that you can't fix the sidewalks without getting rid of the tree. And so I'm glad to hear that there's gonna be something to prevent that. And the only other thing I have to say is, can we get the modern back for us old people that have been around for a while? Right there. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
I'll do my best.
Director Cummings, I do have one, and I'm hope I'm not opening up Pandora's box here. But looking at this project in West Pearl Street, being of my, fire department, I always admire buildings. Someday you may have had to put a fire out in one of them. But it's such a, some great architecture, and some modern ones that replace buildings that did burn in the past, not so great architecture. So can you explain your facade project just briefly?
Yeah.
Because in other words, are we going to try to shoot for a collective flavor in that area, or do we have influence to reflect the flavor?
We do. That's a great question, Mr. Chair, and one I would also suggest is also very appropriate at the PEDC committee, as well as at the planning board. I'll start by saying at the planning board, there is, through the site plan process and through your conditional use process, two typical land use permits that are necessary here in Nashua, an opportunity for the community to weigh in and outline the particular desires of a facade. We actually have some of our design criteria codified in our ordinances. We work cooperatively with an owner, and they very much need to follow the policies of the city. And I gotta say that they have and are willing to do that, and we have seen that. But you just haven't seen a lot of new construction actually in the downtown. Actually, it's only been within the last couple of years that you're actually starting to actually see private property needing to take advantage of our current land use code. So to your point, as you see more and more development occur, you will see the standards that the city officials, you and others, have put out there as what you desire to see. Now, particularly with the facade program that my office has run in the past, in low to moderate income areas, which this street happens to be in one of those designated census tracts, through CDBG, we are given an access to a certain pot of money. And we have from time to time, and I believe actually Mr. Lannon has taken advantage of this program, given out grants to local business owners or local building owners to improve their facade. Just to pretty it up. Now, why do we do that? Because a value of a building is, one of the ways it gets valued is neighborhood character, and you want to present, good street appeal. And by making those types of improvements, it will help not make huge significant value increases, but it will help the neighborhood's overall value increase, which I would suggest you don't want to look at it in isolation, but you want to look at it more of a neighborhood type of approach to help increase the value of a neighborhood. And oftentimes, without that encouragement, you don't see a lot of property owners take advantage of making facade, or often what's referred to as skin improvements, to their asset, because there are other more intensive or capital intensive projects that need to be done that you'd actually get a better return on. So if you made investments in your HVAC system, or if you made investments in your windows, you'd see a better return on that than if you would in seeing the skin being replaced. So oftentimes it doesn't often get prioritized as highly as it would, because sometimes it's a little bit more advantageous for the community than it is for the single business owner. Hence the theory as to why the facade type programs were created. And again, it's something we'd be potentially looking to do again in the near future.
Yes, Alderman, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I just want to echo exactly what Alderman O'Brien said about just making sure the facade really plays into what we're looking to do with the sidewalks in the street. It's an important project, and I feel if there's that buy-in from everybody on the street, it just makes it that much better. As we're kind of turning that area into the downtown entertainment kind of center with the pack opening, the one concern I do have, and we did talk about it earlier, is still just removing of those parking spots on West Pearl Street. I feel with the pack opening, it's removing some prime spots very close to the pack. I know it's not a ton of spots that we would be removing, but sure enough, it is a few spots that would involve people having to walk farther distances to get to the pack. But all in all, I think the design looks good. It's a solid project, but I think there's just a few things we have to think about.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely.
I agree with you, and we will continue to look at it. I will say though, the last thing I want to do is encourage people who are going to the Performing Arts Center to park on street.
Sure.
So I suggest that when the time comes, there are going to be new management tools that we're going to need to implement to the type of behavior that we're going to want to see. Because to your point, yes, there will be limited supply. The last thing I would want to do is to see someone, and it's only in their nature to want to park as close as they can to the Performing Arts Center. So we got to make sure that it's regulated appropriately. And that's one of the reasons why, again, that we had Andy Hill on this call, because we'll be looking to him to give us the advice as to what type of tools and strategies we should be implementing to optimize those parking spaces. I would not want to have someone parking in that parking space for X amount of hours potentially, and basically turn it off to, merchants or others in the downtown that could utilize it, because it needs to be turned over.
Thank you. Alderman Dowd.
You want to do a follow-up?
Well, I'll give a
I'll
follow-up,
do a
absolutely.
follow-up. Sorry about that.
Alderman Gooddavid.
On those parking spots, have we talked about, is there going to be a time limit on those spots? Is there a 2-hour limit? Is that indefinite parking? Or, because it made me think of it when you said somebody could take up that spot for a long period of time. And if the goal is to help improve more flow to downtown businesses and not so much the Performing Arts Center traffic, putting a limit on how long you could park in those spots wouldn't be a bad idea.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely.
I think Andy's on and he can speak to that. I think it's zone 1 and zone 2, but again, when we come out with our parking management plan, I am specifically going to be looking for recommendations to address those issues, because I think we're probably going to need to change them. But
That has been the chicken and the egg of this committee.
yeah. But
for a while,
Andy's on it and he could probably speak to it.
Yes. Mr. Hill.
Yeah, the combination right now is primarily zone 2 with some zone 1 meters, because the level of utilization in those spaces historically has been a little bit lower. And so they have been priced and time limited in zone 2 a little bit more graciously or lax to reflect that. Our anticipation is that as you reduce the supply, the demand along those streets will remain consistent or actually inflate. And as a result, best practice would say that those have to come back as zone 1 meters in order to compel that turnover and make sure that you have that availability for discretionary users, which would be subject to a 2-hour time limit.
Thank you.
Alderman Dowd.
Yeah, I've had several people approach me that are wondering whether the Performing Arts Center will have valet parking. That would solve a lot of the issues. People wouldn't be concerned about parking. They drop their car off, and when they come out, somebody brings the car back to them. A lot of places do that. And I think they feel it would be easier, safer, so I hope we consider that.
I know that our operator, Spectacle Management, is looking at those options. I'm not sure if they've made any decisions.
If we're done, this is, I think was very informative. Again, it was supposed to be informational, briefing the committee on what we're doing, and Director Cummings, again, was looking for direction on this. I imagine as if we give a positive recommendation, to which I will not influence by saying, hope we do. But the point is, as we move, I'm sure many of these things will be tweaked. I can see this actually being jointly decided between infrastructure and some degree with our friends of PEDC as equally as well, because there is an economic impact to this equally as well. So without any further questions, I will entertain further questions, but without any further questions, we do have a pending motion to Director Cummings to carry on forward with this particular project. So without objection, I'll call the vote. See no objection. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carry on, Director Cummings.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Cummings, for our particular records, would we be able to get the slide presentation from our guests
Yes, I will have
that we can enter into the minutes of the meeting?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'll make
Yes.
sure that you have it for your records.
Okay. And to our guests, Mr. Hill, good to see you again. But to everybody else, nice meeting you, and thank you for coming on board and joining us with the meeting. It looks like a very well thought project, and looking forward as this moves forward. I think it will definitely enhance the downtown, so thank you so much for your work.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Seeing that, and I thank you, Director Cummings.
Thank you.
Okay, communications,
There are none.
petitions,
There are none.
unfinished business,
There is none.
new business resolutions,
There is none.
new business ordinances,
There is none.
and there is nothing tabled in committee, because we're just our first meeting, so here we go. Okay. General discussion by any Alderman Dow.
And just to reiterate, tomorrow night's meeting is at Nashua High North plenty of parking, by the way. And it's in the boardroom, so when you walk into the main corridor and down to the left, and then you'll see it, the doors will be open, and it'll be followed at 7 o'clock by the Joint Special School Building Committee, where we're doing a complete overview of the entire middle school project, so that all new people will know how it started, where we're at, and where we're going.
Yeah, thank you, Alderman Dowd, because that was announced in the, did meet the posting mandates and everything. But to the public, and so why the position was changed was because some of the participants at this particular meeting to be at the next particular meeting and to make it available for all that want to go to that meeting. So it was just a matter of convenience. So thank you, Alderman Dow, for that. Anybody else, general discussion?
Alderman O'Brien?
Yes, we're not at public comment yet.
I think you skipped it.
Nope. If you,
Oh,
but
okay,
you're next.
I got it.
If you could give me 2 seconds. 1, 2, I'll open up public comment.
Okay, are you good for me?
You're good, thank you. Can identify yourself and you know the rules, thank you.
Sure. Lori Ortolano, 41 Berkeley Street. I'd like to know a little bit about what the plans are for the barriers, and I was hoping to hear a discussion on that tonight. I'm a little bit concerned, given the time frame where we usually get those out, that no committee has been picked, and we're letting, essentially a couple months go by before we have a meeting to convene on this. I don't want this to be a situation where the administration or the mayor just jams something through and all of a sudden the barriers are dropped back in the street without conducting a proper survey. I did gather some right-to-know public records, and the survey done was really unknown. Nobody that I know of, I certainly wasn't given a copy of what the survey looked like, and it seemed to be sort of informal. It wasn't requested. The survey done by Paul Shea was not requested by the city. It was not sanctioned by the city. It was not scoped out to him to do. There's over 200 downtown businesses, and I think we missed a lot of businesses that would have input. So I would like to see a structured survey done that really gets to everyone and some of the side streets. And I'm just concerned, given the lack of openness with this government and the ability to address the public in public comment, that, you know, another ordinance is going to be written with the wrong reasons for why it's being done, like COVID, and jammed through without respect for the position of the public. And we always seem to be diminished for saying things that don't support the popular position of those who might be seated. And I don't want that to happen. I also want to say my right to know request that was filled was super disappointing, and I have a question for this board. Is Great American Downtown considered a business that's subject to right to know law? And it's important for me to ask that because I did request surveys, and the Greater Downtown, American Downtown through Paul Shea basically told me that he was not responsible for giving me anything and would not give me anything because they were a nonprofit that was separate from the city. And when I got the response from Tim Cummings last Friday,
30 seconds.
go to Paul Shea to get the information. So I just want to know definitively if Great American Downtown is a public entity subject to RSA 91A. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Orlando, to get the definitive answer is not going to be found in this room because I don't think although we do have somebody here with jurisprudence, however, I don't know. I think that would be best asked of our legal department. Anybody else, public comment? Okay, seeing none. Remarks by Alderman? Yes, Alderman Como.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to thank Director Cummings and the design team for their presentation tonight. That was very informative. I look forward to hearing more about this in the future. And just to touch on something that the previous speaker brought up, I have gotten some communication from constituents. I know there was talk in a meeting in December about a potential, I don't know if it's like a citizens committee to discuss the barriers. I have had a couple of people reach out to me and want to know how they can get on a public interest committee like that if one is formed. I don't know. I don't think that's in the works yet, but if it is, maybe Director Cummings, I don't know if you can speak to how somebody would, or who somebody would reach out to get on a committee like that. But other than that, I just wanted to thank for the presentation.
I can answer that. There is an organization that has been around probably since the inception of Main Street. And we're relying on them for the citizen input. That way we can have stakeholders of Main Street, because this affects Main Street. It has nothing to do with my particular neighborhood. So anything that will be discussed with the barrier thing will be people, members of this committee, as well as the stakeholders of Main Street, because they're the ones that are going to have any positive or alleged positive or alleged negative fiscal impact or anything else with it. So that's the objective that the board's doing right now. And I think we do have a couple names. Nothing has been etched in stone as of yet. I got to work with coordination with Director Cummings. Not saying that time is of the essence, but it is. Spring hopefully will be upon us shortly. I know we're anticipating a blizzard in another day. I hope it isn't that bad. But well, hopefully we can get this done, whatever this committee decides on the particular barrier issue. And even though it'll be in the hands of a committee, any member of this Infrastructure Committee can come and attend the particular meetings. So, okay, that being said, I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, outstanding, good. Yes, Alderman Dow.
Motion to adjourn?
Very good, because I don't see a need to go into non-public, and a motion to adjourn is always in order. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned at 8:45 PM. I thank you, everybody, for attending.